discussing the Steve Nunn case, where Steve was charged with the murder of his fiancée, Amanda Ross. This week we'll be discussing the investigation process, and next week we'll be talking about the prosecution. Stay tuned for the details on this case.
Morning, it's 7 minutes after 9 o'clock. This is American DA Live. Commonwealth Attorney Ray Larson in the studio with us. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Jack.
I remember back in 2009 when this crime occurred, and we're talking about the murder of Amanda Ross. And if memory serves me, it was on a Friday morning, early hours on a Friday morning, and you were in here doing the show as we were reporting on it, and clearly you knew a whole lot more about it than we did, and you obviously couldn't talk about it. But I will never forget that morning, and I'm sure you won't either.
Well, that's right, and neither will our guests here today, because it was Friday, September the 11th, 2009, at approximately 6 to 6:30 a.m. You come on the air at 6 o'clock. The police department responded to 541 West Short Street with reference to a shooting, and when the police got there, they found an adult female who suffered from a gunshot wound. She was transported to the med center where she died from her injuries. That was Amanda Ross, and that began the investigation of the case involving Steve Nunn. And Todd Iddings, Detective Todd Iddings, was the lead detective. He was apparently, his day in the barrel was there, and he got the job. And and Todd's here today, and it was a massive investigation.
When did you find out about it?
That morning. I mean, I was aware of it. I didn't know much about it, but I was aware of it, and we work pretty closely with the police department, and they keep us up to date. James Curlis, Lieutenant James Curlis, is with us too, and he kind of notifies me when something like this occurs. And Luana Redcorn is the chief assistant in the office, and so we keep her advised. And Luana, Kathy Phillips, and I were responsible for the case, for the prosecution of the case.
For those that just joined us and didn't hear our discussion 15, 20 minutes ago, we're going to do this in two parts. This morning we're going to look at the investigation of this case, and then next Friday we're going to look at the prosecution, even though there was a guilty plea that was entered, the work that your office did. So today let's start with the investigation.
Okay. Well, so what happens? First, James, what happens when you all get notified that there's been a homicide? Who first arrives at the scene?
Well, the patrol officers are the first responders because they get called to the 911 and respond. Obviously, in this location where there's a victim who's been shot, they notify the Bureau of Investigation detectives, or homicide detectives, who respond. And it begins this, rather, like you say, a large investigation. Our evidence collection people, forensics collection people come, and it starts a big process. Like you say, we notify you, I talk to you, and keep you kind of in the loop and let you know how the case is progressing.
Now, Todd Iddings was the case officer, the lead detective on this thing. What does that mean?
Well, he is the lead detective. He is the person charged with maintaining the case file. Obviously, it's not just a one-man show. We have a lot of detectives that do a lot of work into this.
How did he draw that assignment? Is it on a rotating basis?
We typically do it on a rotation basis. Todd was next up on the homicide rotation.
So Todd was he came to the top of the list,
so to speak.
Okay, so Todd, tell us a little bit about what do you do as the homicide detective in charge of the investigation of the murder of Amanda Ross? You didn't even know it was Amanda Ross when you got there, did you?
Correct. I was actually on call. we have a 24-hour call thing, and I was actually on call that night, so I received a call from third shift patrol sergeants in regards to this. Upon my arrival at the scene, the patrol officers had they had already secured the scene and begun to do what we call a neighborhood investigation. They basically were going door to door, knocking on everybody's door and asking them what they saw, what they heard.
Now this 541 West Short Street is called the Opera Square
Townhomes.
That's where this is.
Yes.
Okay, so door to door means a number of townhouses in that complex, right?
Correct. But not only in that complex, outside that complex in the surrounding area, officers were also knocking on doors to see what they could find out.
Mm-hmm. And as the case lead detective in this thing, they basically report what they find to you.
Yes.
And what they find?
They had spoken to several neighbors who had heard a female screaming, had heard gunshots. They had also located to the west side of the Opera House townhome complex is Bruce Street. Harrison Elementary is located on Bruce Street,
Mm-hmm.
and they observed video cameras on the exterior of that building. They made contact with school officials and were beginning the process of viewing that video to see if there was any evidence on that video.
You know, Jack, it's interesting that if these days videos have become crucial in a lot of the cases that we prosecute, as well as cell phone records.
Mm-hmm.
That technology is helping us solve a lot of cases. Okay, so you're gathering this information. Now, what as the lead detective in this case, what do you do?
Well, by this time, forensics was on the scene, and I usually do a walkthrough with forensics and whoever the first officers are, so we have an idea what we're going to be looking for and how that scene's going to get processed, and then I let the forensic folks do what they do best.
And that's collect evidence.
Collect evidence.
Mm-hmm. They're the Lexington's version of CSI, and that essentially it, except it's reality, not the showbiz part of it.
Correct.
Right.
Even though Amanda had been taken to the hospital, there was still evidence at that scene. She had dropped her belongings. Her vehicle was located there, as well as some of her neighbors' vehicles, and we needed to document that whole scene with video and photographs and collect evidence. About this time, I'd received some information that led me to contact a couple of Mr. Nunn's family members and speak with them.
But her purse was there, so you learned who she was.
Yes.
Okay, and so once that happens, then you begin to realize that there was at some point a relationship.
Yes.
And people provided you that information.
Yes.
This relationship with what turned out to be the defendant, Stephen Nunn.
That is correct.
Okay, so go ahead.
In regards to that, the patrol officers had, upon my arrival, had identified her and informed me of who it is, and upon running a basic check in our computer system, it revealed that she had a relationship with Mr. Nunn that led to a domestic violence order being in place.
To learn more, tune in every Friday morning at 9 a.m. on News Talk 590.